Picture a Victorian lady in her elegant gown. Now imagine what's underneath. Weeks of unwashed skin, lice crawling through her hair, teeth rotting black from sugar and no brushing. This was normal. Doctors in the 1800s actually believed bathing was dangerous. They thought hot water opened pores to deadly miasmas. So people covered the stench with perfume instead of soap. The streets ran with human waste. The drinking water came from the same river that served as the city's sewer. Disease killed more Victorians than old age ever did. Here are the facts. Costume dramas hide. Subscribe to our channel. Number 1. Imagine going an entire month without a shower. Now imagine everyone around you doing the same thing. That was Victorian England. Doctors actually recommended it. Medical journals from the 1840s warned that frequent bathing opened the pores to deadly miasmas. Hot water was considered especially dangerous. Physicians believed it weakened the constitution and invited disease into the body. So the average Victorian took a full bath maybe once a month. Some went longer. The wealthy had bathtubs, but they feared using them. Working-class families shared a single tub of water. Father went first, then mother, then children in order of age. By the time the youngest got in, the water was gray with filth from everyone before them. And that was considered normal. The phrase, "do not throw the baby out with the bathwater," came from exactly this practice. The baby went last, and the water was so dark you genuinely could not see the bottom. Number 2. The smell of a Victorian person would knock you backward. Picture layers of odor building over weeks, sweat soaked into wool that never got washed, coal smoke embedded in every fiber, body oils turning rancid in summer heat, and underneath it all, the unmistakable scent of human waste. There were no daily showers, no deodorant, no antiperspirant. People tried to cover the stench with perfume, but perfume does not eliminate odor. It just adds another layer on top. Wealthy Victorians doused themselves in floral scents that mixed with their body smell into something even more nauseating. Working-class people could not afford perfume at all. They just lived with the smell. Visitors from other countries documented their shock. One American traveler in 1855 wrote that walking through London was like passing through a fog of human decay. Victorians themselves had gone nose blind. They could not smell each other anymore. Their brains had simply stopped registering it. Number 3. Victorian hair was an ecosystem of horror. Women grew their hair long as a sign of femininity, but washing it was considered risky. Medical advice suggested cleaning hair once a month at most. Some doctors recommended cleaning only once every 6 weeks. Without regular washing, the scalp produced oils that built up into a thick, waxy coating. Women used pomades to style their hair. These pomades were made from animal fat, usually bear grease or beef tallow. The fat went rancid within days, adding another layer of odor, and the fat attracted visitors. Head lice found Victorian hair irresistible. The warm, oily environment was perfect for breeding. Lice eggs clustered at the roots, and adult lice crawled freely across scalps. Fine-toothed combs, called knit combs, were standard items in every household. Women spent hours picking lice and eggs from each other's hair. It was so common that nobody considered it shameful. Lice were simply part of life, like breathing. Number 4. Open your mouth in Victorian England, and people knew your class instantly. Dental care barely existed. Toothbrushes were luxury items most people never owned. The common cleaning method was rubbing teeth with a rag dipped in salt or charcoal. It did almost nothing. Meanwhile, sugar had become cheap enough for everyone. Tea with sugar was the national drink. The combination was devastating. Sugar fed bacteria that nobody understood yet. Acid ate through enamel. By age 30, most Victorians had black, rotting teeth. By 40, many had lost half of them. Tooth extraction was the only treatment. It was performed without anesthesia by barbers who also cut hair. The pain was legendary. Some people died from infections after extractions. Others lived with constant toothaches for years because they feared the barber's pliers more. Portraits from the era show closed-mouth smiles for a reason. Showing teeth meant showing rot. Number 5. What Victorians wore underneath would make your skin crawl. Underwear was changed weekly if you were fortunate. Some people went longer between washings. The fabric was thick cotton or linen that trapped moisture against the skin. Without elastic, garments were held up by ties and buttons that chafed constantly. Women wore multiple layers: chemises, drawers, petticoats, corsets. All of it absorbed sweat and body secretions. All of it went unwashed for days. The smell concentrated in these inner layers. Servants who handled laundry reported gagging at the stench of undergarments from even wealthy households, and the clothes themselves harbored life. Body lice lived in the seams of underwear, different from head lice but equally persistent. These lice laid eggs in fabric that hatched against warm skin. People scratched constantly. The itch was so normal that scratching in public carried no stigma. Number 6. Lice were not the only passengers on Victorian bodies. Fleas jumped from person to person in crowded spaces. Bedbugs infested mattresses stuffed with horsehair and straw, but the worst hitchhikers lived inside. Intestinal parasites were endemic across all classes. Tapeworms from undercooked pork grew to 20 feet inside human guts. Roundworms passed from contaminated soil to mouths and then to intestines, where they multiplied by the hundreds. People saw the evidence in their chamber pots, but had no way to treat it. Doctors prescribed mercury compounds that poisoned patients while barely touching the parasites. Some Victorians lived their entire lives hosting worms they could feel moving inside them. Children suffered the worst. Malnourished from parasites stealing their nutrients, they grew up stunted and weak. Medical records from workhouses list worms as a primary diagnosis for over half the children examined. Number 7. Scabies spread through Victorian households like wildfire. Tiny mites burrowed into skin and laid eggs in tunnels beneath the surface. The itch was maddening. People scratched until they bled, and that only spread the infestation further. Entire families passed scabies back and forth for years. The treatment was sulfur paste, and it burned almost as badly as the mites themselves. Doctors applied it to raw, scratched skin. Patients screamed. The paste rarely worked completely because the mites lived in bedding, in clothes, in every fabric surface. You could treat the body and get reinfected the same night from your own pillow. Ringworm left circular patches of scaly skin across faces and scalps. Children in workhouses had their heads shaved to combat outbreaks, marking them as poor and diseased wherever they went. The fungus spread through shared combs, shared hats, shared everything. Victorian life meant shared infection. Number 8, the cures were often worse than the diseases. Doctors prescribed mercury for syphilis, pouring liquid metal into bodies already fighting infection. Mercury caused teeth to fall out, gums to rot, and organs to fail slowly. Patients traded one death sentence for another. Women used arsenic for their complexions. Small doses were supposed to create pale, luminous skin. Instead, arsenic accumulated in tissues, causing hair loss, nerve damage, and eventually death. The beauty standard was literally poison. Lead appeared in everything from face powder to paint to children's toys. Wealthy women painted their faces with white lead ceruse that absorbed through skin over years. By middle age, their nervous systems were collapsing. Tremors, confusion, paralysis. Nobody connected the makeup to the symptoms. And those were just the intentional treatments. Patent medicines sold on every corner contained opium, cocaine, and alcohol, in combinations that created addicts out of people seeking headache relief. Victorian pharmacology was a game of chance where the house always won. Number 9. Cholera killed with terrifying speed. A person could wake up healthy and be dead by dinner. The disease caused such violent diarrhea that victims lost quarts of fluid within hours. Their skin turned blue from dehydration. Their eyes sank into their skulls. Death came from the body essentially draining itself dry, and nobody understood why. Doctors in the 1850s still believed in miasma theory. They thought bad air caused disease. They burned incense and sprinkled chloride of lime to purify the atmosphere. None of it helped. Then came John Snow and the Broad Street outbreak of 1854. In 1 week, over 500 people died in a single London neighborhood. Snow mapped the deaths and found they clustered around one water pump. He removed the pump handle. The outbreak stopped. It was the first proof that contaminated water spread cholera, not bad smells. But the medical establishment rejected his findings for another decade. They preferred their theories to his evidence. Meanwhile, cholera kept killing by the thousands. The 1866 outbreak took 6,000 lives in London alone. Number 10. The water Victorians drank came from the same river they used as a sewer. The Thames received human waste from over 2 million people. It received industrial runoff from tanneries and slaughterhouses. Dead animals floated in its currents. 8 water companies pumped directly from this soup to supply London homes. One scientist examined Thames water under a microscope and called it monster soup. He counted bacteria, parasites, and organic matter in quantities that made the sample almost solid. The poor had no choice but to drink it. Wealthy families could afford filtered water or beer instead, but even their filtered water came from contaminated sources. The filtration technology of the era removed visible particles only. Bacteria passed through untouched. Every glass of water was a gamble with dysentery, typhoid, and cholera. Boiling water would have killed the pathogens, but fuel cost money. The poor could not afford to boil enough water for daily drinking, so they drank it cold and hoped. Many of them died hoping. Number 11. The Great Stink of 1858 finally forced action. That summer was unusually hot. The Thames had been accumulating sewage for decades. The heat turned the river into a bubbling cauldron of decomposition. The smell reached Parliament 3 miles away. Lawmakers hung chloride-soaked curtains over windows, and they still gagged during sessions. Some members vomited. Others fled the building entirely. The stench was so overpowering that government ground to a halt. The same politicians who had ignored sanitation for years suddenly found the issue urgent when the smell reached their noses. Within weeks, Parliament approved funding for a massive new sewer system. It was the first real infrastructure investment in public health. The message was clear. Victorians only fixed problems when the wealthy could no longer ignore them. Thousands of poor people had died from contaminated water. Nobody acted, but make rich men smell something unpleasant, and money appeared overnight. The sewers took years to build. Meanwhile, the dying continued in neighborhoods Parliament never visited. Number 12. The food Victorians ate was routinely poisoned. Milk sellers added chalk and water to stretch their profits. The white color looked right, but the nutrition was gone. Worse, milk often came from diseased cows kept in urban cellars, animals that never saw daylight. Bread contained sawdust, plaster, and alum to make it whiter and heavier. Bakers sold by weight, so additives meant more money. Meat came from animals that had died from disease rather than being slaughtered. Butchers soaked rotting flesh in chemicals to mask the smell and restore the color. Tea was mixed with dried leaves from hedges and colored with toxic dyes to look authentic. Sugar contained lead. Candy for children was painted with arsenic-based colors that looked bright and appealing. Parents unknowingly poisoned their own children with holiday treats. Food inspection did not exist. Anything that could be adulterated was adulterated. Profit always won. Number 13. The slums of Victorian London defied imagination. In areas like Jacob's Island and Whitechapel, families of 10 lived in single rooms. No windows, no ventilation, walls running with damp. 100 people might share a single outdoor toilet that was emptied once a year if they were lucky. Human waste piled in courtyards where children played. The stench was so constant that residents stopped noticing it. Rent collectors came every week, but maintenance never happened. Landlords extracted money from people who had nowhere else to go. Disease swept through these neighborhoods in waves. When cholera arrived, it took whole families in days. The wealthy blamed the poor for their own suffering. Moral reformers called slum dwellers lazy, dirty, sinful. They ignored the fact that clean water cost money, that soap cost money, that every choice came down to food or hygiene, heat or cleanliness. The poor chose survival. Number 14. Victorians coped through denial and perfume. The wealthy carried scented handkerchiefs to press against their noses in public. Pomanders filled with cloves and dried flowers hung from belts. Smelling salts were standard accessories. None of this fixed anything. It just created a fragrant barrier between rich nostrils and poor reality. The other coping mechanism was moral distance. Disease was reframed as divine judgment. The poor got sick because they deserved it. Their filth reflected their character. This belief let the comfortable sleep at night while people died in preventable outbreaks. Churches preached acceptance of suffering as God's will. Doctors blamed patients for their own infections. The system that created the conditions escaped all accountability. Even reformers who fought for sanitation often did so from disgust rather than compassion. They wanted the poor cleaned up so they would stop being offensive. Number 15. The mental toll of Victorian filth went unrecorded, but not unfelt. Imagine knowing your children might die from the water they drink and being unable to afford anything safer. Imagine watching a baby die from diarrhea and being told it was your fault for being poor. Imagine living with constant low-grade illness, always tired, always itching, always aware that something was wrong with your body. Diaries from working-class Victorians describe a kind of resigned despair. They knew their conditions were killing them. They had no power to change anything. Asylum records from the era show admissions for what doctors called melancholia. Women especially were institutionalized for symptoms that look now like depression and anxiety. Living in filth, losing children, watching death circle closer, the mind eventually breaks. But Victorian medicine had no framework for trauma. They called it weakness, hysteria, moral failing. Number 16. So why does Hollywood love this era? The answer is simple. Pretty sells. Costume dramas give us ballrooms and romance because filth does not move tickets. We want to believe there was a time of elegance, of manners, of beauty, before the modern world ruined everything. The Victorian era becomes a canvas for nostalgia. But that nostalgia is built on lies. The elegant gowns hid unwashed bodies. The grand houses sat blocks from open sewers. The romantic heroes had rotting teeth and parasites in their guts. We sanitize history because the truth is too ugly. Survivors of that era left records. They wrote about the smell, the disease, the children buried too young. They did not romanticize their own lives. They endured them. We owe them honesty, not fantasy. The past was not better, it was not simpler, it was survival in conditions that would horrify us. Every costume drama that shows a pristine Victorian world is lying to your face. The real story is the one they will never film, because the truth does not sell popcorn.